Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review Podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review Podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review Podcast and to all of our listeners all across America and around the world. Now, this podcast is ranked by Apple for being among the top 1% of podcasts worldwide. So let me say thank you to all of our listeners and guests for making this possible. Now, if you enjoy our podcast, please, we'd certainly like to get a review from you. Now, question to the audience. Are you familiar with the power and persuasion of storytelling? Well, my guest today will provide you a fulfilling and satisfying overview of the benefits of storytelling. The founder of Fortune 206, she is a marketing expert with over 15 years of leading successful global advertising campaigns. She is also a member of the acclaimed Ford Magazine Communications Council. So, Maria Alonso, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us from Seattle, Washington.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk about storytelling and maybe even showcase some of the campaigns that storytelling really had an impact during my career. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, why don't we begin about a bit more about your background and how you got into this storytelling piece?
Yeah, for sure. So I just kind of started my career working with a huge advertising agency, globally. And I think I was lucky enough to work on the Dove Real Woman campaign, which, if we talk about storytelling, that is just the best example about storytelling, right? So I started my career being an account executive, senior account executive, but really got to be involved with to storytelling from different women and showing the media. At that time, everything you would see in the media would be models and people that were just had the perfect body. And what Dove did, it was actually showcasing real women and being part of this campaign and telling that story and also showcasing real women. And from the casting to working with them in photo shoots, everything was pretty surreal. And I'm lucky enough that the campaign got a bunch of awards at the time. It was pretty innovative. All the people that I worked with were really, really excited to make a difference because it was actually portraying real women in all these commercials, using the product and showcasing bodies in all shapes and forms. So, I think I was just really lucky to be a part of that from the get-go. And then shortly after that, I got the opportunity to work with other huge brands. I got the opportunity to work with Coca-Cola, and I think I was lucky enough because the brand that I worked with was Ciel, which is a water bottle, and I was the account person. I was the brand manager for all Latin America, and the brand was actually going through a little bit of a shift because we wanted to be more sustainable. So we wanted to be a little more conscious in terms of the environment and truly bring something to the environment as opposed to keep accumulating waste to the environment. So the bottles were actually starting to be making from recyclable plastic. So it was just really great to see that shift on the brand. And then that shift on, again, storytelling, right? How do you tell the story to your audience? How do you make sure that your audience relates to the cause? How do you find, people that align with the cause so they can talk about your brand? How do you start doing, different initiatives that talk about taking care of the environment and not just doing like publicity that says, hey, we're made of a recyclable plastic, but actually walking the walk, actually doing like campaigns and working with like different organizations and trying to better the world. So I think that was just, again, like another great campaign that I was part of, that I got to just kind of spearhead it from beginning to end. And I got to be a part of like the very beginning of like, okay, how are we going to pivot this? Who are we going to partner up with? What's the story that we're going to tell our customers, and how are they going to relate to the story and the cost that our brand has? So again, just pretty rewarding, to be honest. Then after that, I got the opportunity to work with Starbucks, and just kind of like similar, I worked with the Latin America piece of business, and again, just similar, making sure that the products tell a story for Latin America, that it's not just one size fits all, because I think what many brands do is they actually take the product from the United States and they just put it in a different market and they hope it fits. But many times that's not the case, right? Like many times you need to localize it, you need to do research on your customer, you need to do research on what story is really going to align to your customer, so your product is successful, so you feel like you're connecting with your customer, so you feel like you're actually making a difference, and you're just another product in their shelf, but you're actually like connecting with your customer, and that's when you're going to create much of the loyalty with your consumer. And ideally, I mean, as marketers, we want to create that loyalty. We want to create that relationship with our consumers, so they become loyalty consumers as opposed to just like a one-off, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, again, just like pretty challenging, trying to figure out what are the products that fit Latin America, and trying to really individualize different countries in Latin America, because I think also what happens in Latin is many times it's just like all Latin, right? And if you like actually looked at Latin America with a fine comb, they're very different cultures. Like if you see Colombia and you see Mexico and you see Brazil, they're all completely different. They all relate to different things. They all have a similar story, but a different story. So you want to make sure that when you bring your product to these places, you tell a story that's actually going to be relatable to them. So again, just like really rewarding. And then from there, I got the opportunity to work with Global Campaign, which is Chosen, which is a sponsorship campaign for an NGO. And again, all about storytelling. Our Chosen campaign, actually, the thing that we were seeing is we actually were not getting that many people sponsoring, that many millennials sponsoring children with the NGO. So we just kind of stop and think, and we're like, okay, what is it that we can do to get millennials to actually be engaged? Like, what story can we tell? And from the data that we found out that millennials actually wanted the people that were sponsored to choose them as opposed to them choosing the sponsors. So usually the way it works, traditional sponsorship, is you get to see a few kids from a few different places and you decide which kid are you going to sponsor. So Chosen was actually switch on that. It actually gave the person that was going to be sponsored the power to choose the person that was going to be sponsoring them. So, I mean, really, really groundbreaking, really fulfilling. And we decided to name this Chosen because you are being chosen. And also World Vision, the NGO that I was part of, it's also a faith-based organization. So again, it's the whole idea that we're chosen by God. So, I mean, just by doing that, like in the first 3 months that we launched the campaign, we increased our market share by 25%. We increased our revenue by 30%. And again, it's just like that story that you're telling, right? It was a story of the kid actually has the power to choose you. And also another thing that we saw in that campaign was that the people that were sponsoring the child would stay longer sponsoring the children. So again, it's because they felt that connection, because they felt that being relatable to the kid that was choosing them. And again, it's just all about the story that you tell. There's many stories, and that's why I love marketing and advertising, there's 20 ways to slice a cake, but it's the story that you're going to choose that's going to resonate best with your audience.
Well, let me jump in here a second because, you said a lot to us now, and pardon me, I was just looking at an article you wrote about crafting an effective brand story, and you've got some bullet points here. So let's talk about the bullet points, for instance, and you've covered them, but let's talk about things such as authenticity. How important is that in terms of crafting your story?
For sure. So I do talk about a few bullet points, and the first one is authenticity. Second one is knowing your audience. The third one is a clear message. Fourth, emotional appeal. And find its visual and verbal elements. With the very first one, which is authenticity, again, I think it's just crucial when it comes to storytelling that you're authentic, that you're giving a message to your consumer that they can relate to, that seems honest, that doesn't damage your brand's reputation, and it aligns to your brand's values and missions, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that when you come with any kind of messaging, it's not something that you're posting as a brand to get more followers, or it's not something that you're posting as a brand to get more consumers, but it's something that is authentic to your brand, that seems natural, because consumers nowadays, and I think honestly they've done their research, they're really smart, they want to make sure that what they bring into their household is something that relates to their values. So as a brand, you want to make sure that you stand for those values, that you align with that vision, and that you tell the story to your consumers that they're going to align to that vision, and you're going to end up having, again, loyalists. You're going to have these consumers that are going to keep consuming your product and not just buy a one-off. Mm-hmm. So people that relate to the same things that you relate to as a brand.
Well, as you said, I think it's important, and you might touch on that again, is that means you actually have to know your audience and understand who they are and what their values are.
Absolutely. That is just number one. I always start all my campaigns with doing research in terms of, okay, who is our target audience? Who is it that we are trying to increase our target audience towards? And what do they like and dislike? And how can my brand fit their likes and dislikes? And how can I tell a story that's going to be able to get their attention, that's going to be able to get them as a consumer? That is just the first thing that I start. I think doing a campaign without knowing your target audience and knowing what your target audience wants and likes and dislikes, it's just kind of just closing your eyes and throwing a dart and hope it sticks. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to be effective. It's probably going to be a waste of your money. You're probably going to be really frustrated. So that initial research, it's so important. Do the work beforehand and test, honestly. I am a huge fan of just kind of A/B testing, or doing pilots and see how effective that they work, because that also it's really going to help your brand in the long run. If you start doing 3-month pilots and you find out, okay, what's the data on that, and then go back and take the information from the data and pivot. I think nowadays we're so lucky that most of the advertising that we do is digital, right? So you can pivot fairly quickly, and you can do a campaign on Monday, and you can get 3 weeks later, you can get a bunch of data and see if it's resonating with your audience or not. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be smarter about the messaging that we're putting out there.
Yeah, the other thing I think,
advantage of the tools that we have, the fact that we can pivot really.
Well, the other thing that you mentioned, of course, was having a clear message, and I think that's very compelling.
Yeah, for sure. Doing a clear message, again, telling a compelling story that has just a clear and concise message, and just make sure you avoid overcomplicating the narrative. There is no reason to just kind of overcomplicate the narrative or the message. You just want to make sure that you focus on the core message that you want to convey, and do everything you can to make sure you get that message across. I think many times what happens in marketing is a lot of products start throwing different messages, and you get a very confused consumer because you don't know exactly what the brand is standing for. So that's why it's just really important to make sure that you have a few clear messages, and that's what you keep saying over and over, because that's really what's going to resonate with the audience, that being repetitive, making sure that you're saying the messages in different outlets, making sure that they're hearing the same story from different voices and from different outlets. Like, that is really what's going to make the consumer come to you, and what's going to make you being able to connect with your consumer, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, you also mentioned emotional appeal. Talk a bit about what is emotional appeal as you deliver your message.
Yeah, for sure. So when I talk about emotional appeal, I talk about incorporating elements that just kind of evoke emotions. So elements that, whether it's like joy or sadness, inspiration, nostalgia, anything that's like an emotional connection, that can be just really significant to enhance the impact of your story. So, for example, if I go back to the campaign that I did for the NGO that I was a part of, like if I go back to Chosen, again, that emotional appeal of you're helping someone, you're connecting with someone, you're sponsoring that person, and you have that one-on-one relationship, like that speaks really loud. That speaks louder than words, because you're having your consumer connect in an emotional way to your product, in this case, the sponsorship product. Also, many times, the aspect, for example, when I worked in with the brand for Coca-Cola, that we were actually being a lot more like conscious in terms of the environment, and we were making our bottles from recyclable plastic. Again, if you are connecting that with your audience in terms of, hey, we care about the environment, and you have an audience and a consumer that cares about the environment, you have that emotional connection, and that's going to go a long way, and that's what's going to make your consumer become a loyalist as opposed to just a one-time purchaser.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got into some other areas that I think are important, and that is implementing the strategy for your storytelling, and I think that's very important that our listeners might need to know a bit about. Such as you mentioned here, identifying your brand's core story.
Exactly. I think like identifying your brand's core story, like identifying what your brand stands for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Determine what makes your brand unique. Like the first thing that I ask when I'm working with a brand is, what's your unique selling point? Like, why would people want to buy you versus another product? And that's just really important, like knowing how are you different from the competitor? What makes you unique? What is the brand's core story that you're going to tell? And many times it could be personal experience. Like it could be that someone starts a product out of something that happened to them, and they have that emotional connection with the product, and that story could be your unique selling point. Like many times it starts about necessity, right? So for example, there's a lot of like free and clear like products. So maybe there was someone that was like getting rashes and had eczema, and they created this detergent that's free and clear, and they have that connection with that product, and they have a connection with the product they created. And then again, that's a unique selling point, and that is the story that they're going to go out and tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are just really powerful stories, because you're really passionate about something that perhaps wasn't there before, that you created, and you want to make sure that everyone that had that problem, like maybe, like again, going back to the free and clear, like maybe you want to connect with all the people that have eczema, and they use all these other detergents that have a bunch of perfumes and have a bunch of things, and when they throw their things in the washer, they come out and they get rashes and it itches. And again, connecting, identifying what your unique selling point and connecting with your consumer, that's just what's going to get you the most for your buck. That's what's going to get you people that identify with your brand.
Mm-hmm. So nothing now that you've developed what your delivery message and so forth are. You mentioned also about leveraging multiple channels as a way to deliver this story that an advertising package you put together. Let's talk about the multiple channels that could be available to you.
For sure. And I think I touched a little bit on this, but again, it's just like giving that message to your core audience through different channels. So different channels could be like a social media, it could be a blog, it could be a video, it could be a podcast, it could be like the ads that you see online, newspapers, at homes, TV, like all those are different channels. And if you keep saying the same message in all these different channels, then you're going to resonate with the audience. Like there might be someone that's like driving on a highway and they see an out-of-home, and that out-of-home has a message that connects with them. So then they get into their computer and they're like checking their email, and then another like a banner comes out with the same message for the same product. Like I think eventually they're still resonating that message or those messages with that product. And if it's something that they connect with, they might do a double click. I mean, at the end of the day, you want them to want to know more about your brand, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the first thing about a brand is you want to create awareness. You want to make sure that people know that you're there. But then after that, you want to make sure that they're learning about you, and eventually you want to make sure that they are purchasing you, right? Like that's just the funnel that it goes to for advertising that we use in marketing. But again, it's just showing these messages, making sure that you're putting them in a lot of different outlets so you can hit your consumer throughout different points of their journey.
Well, I certainly agree with that. And one of the things that you do is also perhaps mention, well, why not create a calendar so that you can deliver these messages at different parts or different times of the year, maybe through different activities going on throughout the year as well.
Exactly. When I create a calendars for the products that I work with, I make sure that my content calendar has, again, what messages am I going to give, what stories am I going to tell, and make sure that I tell these stories in my social media, in my emails, in my TV, in my out-of-homes, in my newsletters, making sure that I'm telling the same story in different places so I can hit the same consumer throughout their journey, but then I can also hit like different consumers. It might be just one that likes to read on paper, right? So this person might actually read my article in the newspaper, or there might be someone that sees my at home when they drive at home. So it's just making sure that you're being repetitive and just kind of like doing that like completely like go-to-market campaign.
Mm-hmm. And now that obviously we've created the story and we've gotten it out there, then of course we have to measure and find out exactly what results, how well did it do. So what are some of the steps that you suggest in terms of measuring the output that you produced?
Measuring and being able to pivot and adapt, it's so important. And that's why I love technology, and I love where we're going, because you can do a campaign and then you can see how it performed after 3 weeks. And you can see whether your visual is resonating with the audience. You can see if your copy is resonating with the audience. And if not, you can tweak it and try something else. And that's what's so important about looking at the data and making decisions with the data. I think right now we're just so lucky that we have a ton of data. We can really make really educated decisions. I mean, honestly, like 15 years ago, we didn't have that. We didn't have, like, digital advertising wasn't as big as it is. Like, we couldn't pivot and adapt within, like, 3 weeks. Like, we didn't necessarily have that. And I think right now we're in the stage that we can really make educated data decisions, and we can measure them, we can adapt, we can pivot. And there is really no reason, if you do all the research on your audience and on your customer, that you're going to be able to hit them where it counts, right? That you're going to be able to tell the story that's going to move them.
Mm-hmm. As we come to a close here, one of the things I think is important, because you mentioned millennials, and millennials are big in terms of sustainability and social responsibility. Talk about how you let them know that sustainability and social responsibility is part of your marketing product, if you use it.
Yeah, I think sustainability, to be honest, is right now more than ever, it's really important because, like you said, it's like all these like millennials and Gen Z, like they want to make sure that the brand that they're consuming cares about the environment as much as they care about the environment. That it's not just a brand that is going to be like creating waste, but it's actually going to do something about it. So what I've been seeing a lot from like different products is they all have this kind of like arm of sustainability, and there's a lot more products like, for example, like Rothy's. It's a shoe that's made out of recyclable material. And like that, there's just a lot more in the market. And again, it's telling that story to your consumer, telling them what you're doing, and make sure that they connect with that story. And I mean, it could be, you could do it as a brand and stand for sustainability regardless, which I think you should. Or you can find out what moves your target audience and try to create arms of sustainability that moves your target audience specifically, right? Like, I think that's where all this data that you have can be useful. But again, making sure that you're doing something with sustainability, that I think has become the core of most brands right now, because us millennials and Gen Zs, we want to make sure that if we're buying a product, that product is going to do something for the environment. Like, there's going to be something good that's going to come out of it. I think back in the day, it wasn't that way, but now it's really important to make sure that you're doing good and that the brands that you're purchasing are doing good for the world as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Maria, let me say that you provided us with exceptionally lot of valuable material. Is there anything you think that we need to know that maybe you haven't mentioned yet?
Well, I think I did cover a ton. I mean, again, like sustainability, social responsibility. Again, like the consumer just really values that. I'm really excited to see where storytelling is going with all these like tools that we have, like user-generated content, AI, like all these like different tools that we can use to tell a better story and learn faster from the data that we get. So I'm just really excited to see what the future holds, especially on storytelling, because that's really the core of any brand.
Mm-hmm. Well, my guest today has been Maria Alonso, founder of Fortune 206 and an expert storyteller. I certainly hope that you've benefited from her wealth of information that we've delivered today. And of course, I certainly want to thank Maria for being a guest on the Public Relations Review podcast, and hope that you've enjoyed her. And if you have, we'd certainly like to get a review from you. So let me say thank you, and join us again for the next edition of the Public Relations Review podcast.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review podcast, and have a great day.